Welcome to Fantasy Sports Daily with Kyle Elfrink and Ray Flowers, Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to use the promo code FSD20 for a 20% discount on the products over at fantasyguru.com.
Welcome in to Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by fantasyguru.com. Kyle Elfrink here, Ray Flowers over there, and I'm guessing there's a name for this day, but I have no idea what it is. I actually just looked at the corner of my computer, 2/22/24, which, Ray, 2 plus 22 equals 24. I'm sure those who are into dates and numbers and how they align, there's got to be some kind of description of that 2/22/24, right? Something.
Yeah, so we've got Pi Day and all these kind of I love math. And I wish I was better at it. If I was better at it, I'd probably be in a different industry because I always wanted to do like astrophysics or something like that. But yeah, I'm sure there's a group of people out there, Kyle, that certainly have this day marked as something important.
Yeah, Ray's mostly down for May the 4th. Be with you. That's the one that Ray digs, coming up here in a couple of months. A pleasure to have you with us. Today's kind of a big day. Coming up at 3 o'clock, spring training game number 1. First game of the spring, San Diego and LA. They're getting a slightly earlier start because we haven't even talked about this, I don't think, Ray, but those two teams are going to South Korea. Mm-hmm. So what is that? I think it's exactly a month from now. It's like the 22nd, 23rd, maybe, those two games, which is about 5 or 6 days before the actual regular season begins. So for people who are sticklers for these things, Ray, and they want to draft before the season begins, understand the season actually begins damn early this year with those two games in South Korea.
Yeah, we drafted the Labor League we talked about on the show yesterday. You can find that video over at the website. You can find it on YouTube at youtube.com/@elite+network. You can find my article. It's free for everyone over at the website as well, fantasyguru.com. Because that's run by Steve Gardner of USA Today, and he's very much on top of things. So our first week, it's a roto league, but our first week is those two games plus the next week. Okay. So, just make sure your setup it's clear. Because someone asked me yesterday, what do we do? Do I draft before or after? And I'm like, well, I mean, my assumption is that those games count for week 1, whether it's a head-to-head or a roto league. I don't think they should be excluded. Even if you draft the day after they start, I think they should count. What do you think?
I think they should. I've got a home league draft, which will be the weekend after. It'll be that Saturday, which is like 2 or 3 days after those games in South Korea. And it's like 2 or 3 days before March 28th or whatever the actual start date is. And Ray, I think we will, retroactively score those. And, if Yamamoto, Ray, goes out and throws a 7-inning shutout, you watch, he'll be a top 5 or 6 pitcher. Don't you think? I mean, he's already probably top 15, top 20.
Right.
And Ray, that will mess with people. There's already the excitement, but if he goes over there and shuts out like Tatis and Machado and I know the Padres aren't great anymore, but it's still a decent lineup. That'll lift his value like crazy. That is one guy in particular, Ray, that I think that one game, it's just one game, but because of the excitement with him, the Dodgers hype, if he's really good in that game, I could see him easily vault into the first half dozen pitchers off the board, which is crazy, but it'll happen.
You don't think people will make that decision because I took him as my first pitcher in Labor the other night? That's
I had him in a league too. I took him as my first guy. I guess I'm buying into the hype a bit with Yamamoto.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we've talked about this idea. Like in that Labor draft, the guy that was taken right after me is Tyler Glasnow, and it's like Tyler Glasnow can't throw 130 innings. So even once you get past like 5 guys, it's like. So there's obviously risk with Yamamoto and all that, but the talent is absolutely there. All the scouts believe in it, and we'll see how it turns out.
What do we got for today? As noted, the start of spring training. We got a little bit on that. We will continue our discussion of all things shortstop this week. One guy I don't think we've mentioned. I went here Monday, so maybe Ray mentioned this, but we got to talk about Oneil Cruz. Oneil Cruz did not play a lick last season. Now he's back, and there's obviously been other rookies to arrive and other storylines to emerge. He plays in Pittsburgh. Maybe a bit of a forgotten player, maybe a forgotten superstar. We'll see where Ray lands on that as we talk about Oneil Cruz. Team preview. Everyone's been waiting for this one. The Colorado Rockies. Quick question, Ray. Last year they had 59 wins.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if this year is going to be a whole lot better. How does Bud Black stay on board? Why is he still a guy with the Colorado Rockies right now?
There he is, Kyle.
Who's that? Is that
Brendan
your
Rodgers.
man or Brendan Rodgers?
Brendan Rodgers. I told you I'd get him on there.
Okay. Well, congrats. I wouldn't expect anything else.
Yes. How does Bud Black keep his job? That was your question, right?
Yeah. How's he keep? Is he just such a good guy that doesn't matter if they win 65 games every year?
Yes. I think it's partly that. And maybe at least the ownership is legitimately aware of the fact their team isn't very good. I don't. But yeah, you're right. He's a nice guy. He's a baseball lifer.
Yeah.
I've never really heard anything negative about him, but
people love him.
Yeah. I mean, he hasn't been. I mean, at some point you can blame the manager, but what's he doing wrong if his team just isn't any talent? There's no talent. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the hope would be like in the argument against him, Ray, would be, hey, you're a pitcher. You were a pitching coach. We're not giving you all-stars on the mound.
Yeah.
But why don't you develop some of these guys? We get it. It's Coors Field. It's difficult. But Ray, I guess is their biggest success story Kyle Freeland? It's like Herman Marquez. I don't know. I don't know what's going on here over the last decade. They literally have nobody that has even come close to being like considered as a top 40 starting pitcher.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the group now, and we'll talk about the team, right? But you look at the group now, and it's like it's ugly. Like their predicted starting rotation is ugly. And in the bullpen, Justin Lawrence, Tyler Kinney, and Jalen Beeks.
That bullpen, I thought the White Sox had a bad setup, Ray.
Yeah.
This Rockies bullpen is brutal.
I mean, Bud Black can take guys from being a D- to a C+, okay, but they're still a C+. Like that's the thing. I don't know, Kyle. They're in a rough spot.
Our draft guide focus today, we'll take a look at Strand, Ray. Got some news and notes. Gunnar Henderson, Tim Anderson, they're in the news. Justin Fields on the NFL side continues to be in the news, talking about the rumors that suggest the Bears may be moving on from him. So we'll get to all that over the next hour or so. As usual, hit us up in YouTube with the chat room, Facebook, X, wherever you're at. You can always give us your thoughts, any questions that you might have. Additionally, we've got the draft guide that's available. We like to tell you every day because, hey, this is how sales work. You got to remind people. You got to be in their face, Ray. So get in their face and tell them what they're missing if they don't have the draft guide.
A lot. The draft guide is something that we're really proud of. Maybe we is a strong word because it's me, because it's mostly me. But we do have articles from Rob Povia. He just dropped one about catchers yesterday. We've got Patio Joe, who we've seen on the show here, talking about head-to-head. We've got Bonder and MLB Model talking about best ball. So we've got a little bit of the team involved doing a lot of things. We've got rankings, points league rankings, dynasty rankings, rookie rankings, mixed league, AL and NL only, auction values for all these things. We've got all that as part of the draft guide. We've got all the articles talking about various subject matters. We had a rookie week. We had a head-to-head week. This week, we're starting today, the home run week. So we've got certain sections talking about that. We'll have access for all of you to go to Discord and ask any and all questions you want to get answers all day around the clock. And then we've got, I think, one of the bigger situations with this sucker is that it's a full season draft guide, right? It's not just a preseason draft guide. It's through the whole season. You get the ability to read all the articles, converse all season long in Discord. You get the rankings, full rankings update, 600 guys, first of every month, get updated. And all of it is available right now at the early bird price for $50. But as we tell our folks here on the show, Kyle, use the promo code FSD20. That's FSD20. That knocks the price down even further, 20% more down to $40. Basically a price of going out to grab a couple beers with your buddy on a Friday night, get you coverage all season long for seasonal baseball.
In regards, Ray, to those rankings, would you like a little more work? Could I suggest a little more work for you? I know you're always hitting me up on G-Chat like, I have nothing to do today, Kyle. Can you give me? You know what I think be cool? And I don't know how much work this actually is. Maybe you can tell me. But I think it'd be neat, Ray, because you do those rankings at the first of every month to have some sort of where they were in April, May, June, July, to kind of see that up and down and how they change. Now, again, that's obviously more work, but I think that'd be kind of cool to see over the course of a year how a guy goes up and down and fluctuates, and if you were on a guy early or if not, all those things. Just kind of more bullet points or data points, I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think that would be an excellent addition. No, and it's been asked.
Intern. Get an intern,
Yeah,
Ray.
well, it's an excellent question. It's been asked previously, and it was an excellent question when the users asked me, and I will say it this way. I don't have the time to collate data like that. Ideally, we'd have a tool that would do it.
Yeah.
Because it's available, right? I'm not in charge of that department.
I'm going to make a public plea. If anybody's looking for a summer internship, it's going to, I mean, I'll suggest it'll be unpaid. But if you love baseball and you're somebody who's interested in this world, this industry, I'm sure that Ray, Jeff Mans, whomever would make it, would love to hear from you. And you can do things like this. And you can work hand in hand with Jeff Mans. I mean, how cool would that be? But I don't know. Hit those people up on Twitter or something. It's, again, it's newsflash. In this business, you're working for free for a lot of time until you make your bones. And I'm not speaking to 28-year-olds or people. These are people. Ray, what we're talking about here is something a 16-year-old baseball fanatic could do and kind of help out and kind of learn the ropes and get your foot in the door, as they say.
Honestly, Excel is a wonderful tool. I probably use 9% of what Excel can do. So this might be something that a whiz-banger 16-year-old could do in 15 minutes. If that's the case, like you're saying, we'll sign you up. But yeah, just so people know, sometimes they ask me my life story, and I've written and talked about it previously many times. I worked for free for like a year when I first started when I was in college. So it's a long, tough road to get to where we are, Kyle.
Yeah, to get to where, I don't know where we are, but to get to where we are. Okay, let's leave that in the rear view mirror and let's get into the meaty part of today's show. As noted, that spring training game, Padres in LA, I'm sure MLB Network probably has that game on. It's a 3:10 first pitch. Excuse me. Couple of things to note there. Joe Musgrove, I think, is maybe not to start, but is going to make an appearance, and that's good news because he missed 2.5 months at the end of last year, I guess it was. And Gavin Lux, Ray, is another guy set to be out there for the Dodgers. Again, I don't know if it's going to be starting or not, but both those guys, it'll be good to see him. Lux is kind of like the guy we're going to talk about here in a second. Gavin Lux, we didn't much see. He was out all season, much like Oneil Cruz, but he will be a guy to follow in the spring. We touched on him, earlier in the offseason, and he's one of those guys, and this may not be fair, but I fear the ship has already sailed. Like, he missed his opportunity, but I could be totally wrong. If he has a healthy 150 games in this lineup, maybe he explodes this season.
Yeah, I'm getting pictures. Phil Backert, our producer over at SiriusXM, who also covers everything Orioles and does the IDP for us in football at fantasyguru.com, just sent me a couple photos before the show started. He's down at spring training. He's pumped up, obviously, as an lifelong Oriole fan. He's got a lot to get excited about. So those juices are really going. And, guys like Oneil Cruz or Gavin Lux are not forgotten players by any stretch of the imagination. But, that post-hype sleeper term we kick around a lot, people have short memories. And, Gavin Lux was supposed to be a banger, like coming all up in the numbers and the production and the scouting reports. Maybe never a superstar, but a really good offensive player. And we shouldn't forget that fact because he had a knee injury that cost him last season.
Yeah. Speaking of spring training, I think there's maybe a few games tomorrow. Saturday is kind of the big day where everybody gets rolling Saturday in Florida and Arizona. So a little bit of a appetizer today and tomorrow leading up to the big weekend. Okay, Ray, let's get into Oneil Cruz. We've been talking shortstops all week long and focusing on different aspects of this position. One big question, the surprises of last year, the bums of last year. Thursday is kind of an open-ended spot for each position where we can delve into something that maybe is worth discussing. And I think Oneil Cruz is. Again, there are a lot of great young superstars in baseball, and we know who they are, and we got to see them last year. We didn't get to see much of Oneil Cruz. And the expectation is, at the age of 25, this guy should be a superstar. And if Pittsburgh is ever going to turn things around, he'll be a big part of it. He did play a handful of games last year, about a week and a half before the injury. But overall, Ray, in the big leagues, and again, he got called up extremely late in 2021. Kind of the same thing in 22. He was halfway through the season. Then last year was a blown season with the injury. They've been trying to get this guy they'd love to have him, Ray. In a perfect world, you'd be at 175, 180 games, maybe 200 games at this point. Instead, we got him at 98 games. And that doesn't mean this is not a Gavin Lux situation. Even Gavin Lux has played more games to that. But Oneil Cruz is a guy who we're all kind of ready to see, and it's almost like he needs to do it pretty quickly. I don't know. It's like, okay, 98 games, that showed us what you could be. Now coming into 2024, show us what you will be this season.
I saw this before the show this morning randomly on social media, and I assume it's accurate because it's from a trusted source. Do you know that the largest free agent contract the Pirates ever signed was Francisco Liriano? $39 million. And it was like 2013. Ugh. Sorry, Pirates fans. Oneil Cruz, and you see it, and I jokingly put it on the graphic on the screen there. He was Elly De La Cruz before Elly De La Cruz. Mm-hmm. And some people forget this because of the injuries and the setbacks that he's dealt with. But he's 6'7", 220. In 2022, he hit the hardest ball ever tracked. Okay. And again, this is since 2015, roughly. So this doesn't go back to Barry Bonds era and all those guys. But think about that. The hardest ball ever hit was him in 2022. And he was also top 3% in all of baseball in arm strength, sprint speed, and base running value.
Tools, baby, tools.
So he hits the ball harder than anyone. He throws it harder than anyone. He runs as fast as anyone. And he's 6'7". So this is a new breed of athlete that we're used to seeing in basketball, to be fair, at his size. He's got the size of a basketball player. And you can see it there per 162 games. You extrapolate things out, talking 30-20, 90-90. I mean, that's pretty damn good for a guy who was still learning the game at the time those numbers were put up.
As with so many young players, Ray, guys who have tools, guys who can kill the baseball, there's a lot of swing and miss here. Is that going... I don't want to say that is what he is. I mean, again, we've got less than 100 games, but in those 100 games, he has 138 strikeouts. I mean, that is a massive strikeout total. If he plays a full season, Ray, I almost fully expect him at least to be 150 Ks, and we may get into the 180s. I mean, that's possible. Now, the thing with Pittsburgh, they're going to play him. Yep. It doesn't matter if he's got 180 strikeouts. They're committed to him. He's the guy. But, Ray, if you're getting up to those strikeout numbers, can this average change much? I mean, is he going to be one of those guys who, with 150 games, you're going to get 4 strong categories, but that batting average may never get above 240 with those kind of strikeout numbers?
Yeah, and we see a lot of players come up with this, hole in their game, right? And the great ones overcome it. Will Oneil Cruz talent allow him to do that? Will his size allow him to do that? It's obviously stupid to say, but let's say it. He's 6'7". His strike zone's huge, right? He's got the same problem Elly De La Cruz has. Elly De La Cruz is, again, so it's so fascinating, the parallels here. Elly De La Cruz and Oneil Cruz could both go 25-40 this year and both hit 229. That's possible. And so I think you're totally right that the skills are going to play. He's going to be in the lineup every day. If healthy, he doesn't go 20-20, I'd be surprised. But he might hit 238. He might hit 229. I think a top end for him is probably 250 at this point. But if that's a huge key, the strikeout rate. If he goes from 34% to 27, 28%, if he makes that level of a change, he could hit 260 this season.
I would argue, and this is according to NFBC, that he's a little undervalued, Ray, because of what he can be. Mm-hmm. He is a starting shortstop, 12-team leagues. He's the 11th off the board. It's a round pick, 75 to 80 overall. Mm-hmm. I'd be willing to go earlier, Ray. I look at, I'd take him before Matt McClain. I'd take him before Nico Horner, CJ Abrams. And the attraction is it could be hella good. It could be 4 really strong categories. And again, you go into it with the idea of 235 is fine. Mm-hmm. That's how I'd look at it. Career average 237. If you just understand that 235, he can do a lot of things, Ray, with a 235 average.
For sure.
And he's going to be at the top of the order. He's going to be hopefully playing every day, all these things. So I think he's a bit undervalued in that spot just because of what can be. I'm willing to play the what can be game with him.
Yeah, and our rankings over at fantasyguru.com, and again, they're updated as needed, which could be as often as every day. We currently have Oneil Cruz as shortstop 9, which would be ahead of guys like Horner and McClain that you mentioned. And, there's projection in that. It's a Pirates team that's not very good. There could be rust because he didn't play last year. We're talking about the swing and miss in the batting average, all those kind of things. But this is not, no offense, but this is not Ezekiel Duran, right? This is a guy that can be an outright superstar in this game. And I agree with you. I did the labor draft the other night, and I ended up with Lindor and Seager early. And I don't regret it, but it was like I was looking there, and I was looking at the board. I'm like, damn, Oneil Cruz is still sitting there. I would have loved to take him in this round. So I agree with you. I think that he's one of those guys that despite my let's play it safe, and all, the cost right now is worth investing in Oneil Cruz. I'm totally in.
And speaking of costs, this is one thing we haven't really touched on with shortstop is Ray, to get a starting shortstop, you got to get it early. These guys are disappearing by the 6th or 7th round. So that is a position, Ray. And some people, I don't need it. I love shortstop 16. He's my guy. Mm-hmm. But according to ADP, if you're wanting one of those top level guys, it's going to be a striking early. And in fact, on ADP, Ray, I think the first, the top 8 guys at shortstop are all going before the end of the 4th round, and sometimes before the end of the 3rd round in a 12-team league. So it's a position that people are gobbling up early.
It is, and it's one of the reasons why in that labor draft that I did go early on the shortstop, because A, that's what you had to do to play the position. B, there's a lot of talent there, and it's really like the group as a whole. A lot of those guys have speed too. Like Corey Seager doesn't, but looking at the rest of the guys that are in the top 10 at that position, like they all should be 20 steal guys. So it's a very attractive position. There's some age there. There's a ton of youth there. It's a great place to be thinking early about building your team because there's a lot of talent. I mean, Ellie De La Cruz, Bobby Witt, Gunnar Henderson, CJ Abrams, Oneil Cruz. I mean, talk about let's get a 25 and under team put together and what will we look like? That would be a banger group. My goodness.
Well, and still superstars like Turner and Bichette, Seager, who you've talked to. I mean, it's a loaded position, and that's why it's going early. But just a reminder, Oneil Cruz, I like the potential and certainly a guy I may reach for. I don't like early reaches, but if I see him sitting around the 5th round and I don't have my shortstop, by all means, I'm thinking Oneil Cruz. Let us move from shortstops to our ongoing team-by-team previews. Today, Ray and I are taking a look at the team that calls the Rocky Mountains their home. And I don't know how often you've been to Denver, Ray. I love Denver. I love Blake Street. I love the Lodo area. I love Coors Field, all that. I'll be going there later in the summer for a visit. I really wish they had a better franchise. The ballpark's great. It's like they got all the pieces, the city, it's thriving, all these things. Like Denver deserves something better than the Rockies. And they've had a few moments, but I don't think this year is going to be one of those moments, Ray. It's still a team that, last year they had 59 wins. Frankly, if they get more than 68, that's a win. if they sniff 70 victories, that's a win for the Rockies this year. Despite all that, we still have to talk about them because they do have a roster. They do have guys you can draft. And we start with our player profile, which, Ray, is a guy that we've been drafting for a decade now, Kris Bryant. And, Kris Bryant was the original Gunnar Henderson, I guess you could say. Jackson Holiday, he was a guy, wow, this guy going to be a superstar. And he's not been a letdown. I mean, he was very, very good with the Chicago Cubs. But overall, Ray, it kind of feels like, well, he's had good years with the Cubs and the start was great. And probably the last 4 years, it's just been there. He's bounced around. The numbers haven't been there. The injuries are now catching up to him. And it's almost shocking to see that ADP on him, isn't it? I understand why to an extent, but I still feel like there's a better player in there than 270 overall right now.
Agreed. By the way, I went to Colorado with my brother and my dad. Very fond memories. It was one of the last trips the three of us took together. Loved it there as well. Beautiful space, Denver. I looked over at DraftKings and the projected win total for the Rockies, plus 100 to go over 60.5 victories. So the number 60.5 for the Rockies.
But that's a doubling of your money. 60 wins, 61 wins, and I can double my money. That might be something I'd take them up on.
Minus 120 if you don't think they're going to get to 60.5. So better odds to get over that. Bryant is interesting, and this, that, look, Kris Bryant's 32 years old, and he's a former star. And I have always been partial to Kris Bryant because I really like his game. There was a period of time where he was never, I don't know, he was never really elite in the fantasy game because he never ran, and he was never hitting 315 or 320, but he was really good, and especially in on-base percentage leagues, he was cranking those things out. But to your point, when he went to Colorado, you and I both said, Rockies, what are you doing? This is a dumb contract. 7 years, $182 million.
And I will say it wasn't necessarily dumb to pay Kris Bryant that. I mean, it's a little high, but it was dumb for the Rockies, right? That context. It was more on the team than it was on why did you spend it on this player? Right. Why did you spend that money on any player out there with where you are?
Yeah, they could have spent it on Ronald Acuna. It's like, what are you doing? Your team sucks. So there's high expectations, obviously, when you come in as this huge free agent signing, and he struggled. And, there are the positive reports. He's healthy. He's feeling good, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Kris Bryant might be in the Byron Buxton zone now, right? He might just be a guy that plays 95 games. Maybe his body, even though he's only 32, has got to the point where he just can't play every day and all that kind of stuff. But I agree with you, even though his 2 years in Colorado have produced extremely moderate numbers, at a price point of 272, I'm in on Kris Bryant at that point.
Absolutely. I don't think you can deny any of that at 272 because when you get to that range, Ray, you probably don't have many guys who, again, they all got issues. Bryant's is staying healthy. Okay, that's his issue. But if we can overcome that, everything else should flow. I don't think this guy can play 140 games, Ray, and have fewer than 25 home runs. I don't think. If he gets 140 games, he should be sniffing 100 ribbies with that ballpark. If he gets 140 games, 80 plus runs, he's probably done stealing. I mean, what is it? 0 steals in 2 years. So I don't know if that's ever coming back. But Ray, to your point, to kind of give a perspective on this, if you're in a 12-team league, this is a guy you take in the 23rd round that could easily return top 10 round value as a 30, 100, 80 guy with a decent average to boot. And again, that's a lot of wish casting. I totally get that. But Ray, that's what everybody's doing in the 270s. And this is a guy, I don't think he's washed up. It's just keeping him on the field. Like Mike Trout, keep him on the field. He'll probably be fine. But the problem is you got to get him in the 5th, 6th round. This is a guy you get in the 23rd round. By all means, you should be interested in taking that guy.
Yeah, guys taking around him. Interestingly enough, the guy right behind him in ADP over at the NFBC in February is Gavin Lux. The guy right behind him is Max Kepler. The guy right in front of him is Brandon Lau. Shea Langoliers. Sign me up for Kris Bryant at that price point.
Yeah. What's stunning with him, Ray? He has not hit at Coors Field.
Yeah.
Cubs, Giants, now the Rockies. It's stunning. His career OPS there is 738.
Which is below the work he's done on the road in the same time.
Yeah, it's 9 homers in 84 games there. 9. So I still believe 25 with 140. Yeah, sign me up. But for whatever reason, he's not a guy who's done well.
Well, he's had a back issue too, right? Isn't that been one of the things with him? And but yeah, I would say 20, 80, 80. That's where I would want to be. Right. And if he gets 25, 90, 90 or whatever, okay. But if he goes 20, 80, 80 at that price point you're paying, you're going to be totally fine with that.
I think you're right. 4 questions on this Rockies team as we move away from the focus on Bryant. Let's focus on the guy, Ray. It's going to sound weird because Kris Bryant came up and there was hype. This guy has not seen the hype. I remember when he was traded to the Rockies last winter. We said, well, why not? Get a young guy, throw him at third base in the outfield. Maybe he'll hit. Nolan Jones, who, again, it's a know-nothing team, Ray. But he's about, every year there's the Rocky hitter, that guy gets to play Coors Field. Nolan Jones is probably that guy. I don't feel like I see a whole lot about Nolan Jones, who had a surprisingly across-the-board solid season. He was good in all 5 categories. Not great, but I wonder, Ray, is this the next great Rockies hitter where you say, wow, look at that product of Coors Field. Nolan Jones had 32 homers and 110 ribbies, or is that just silliness?
Well, it's funny. I was talking to Jeff Mans a couple weeks ago as he was kind of really starting to get into baseball as soon as like the World Series, the Super Bowl was done. And he's like, this Nolan Jones kid, I'm thinking to myself, I saw a couple games in the second half last year, and I'm thinking, yeah. He goes, then I look up and I realize he went 2020. And he's like, holy crap. I'm like, yeah, you're not sneaking Nolan Jones by anyone this year. He was great down the stretch. Yeah. And, talking about the Coors Field, and we always discuss that with the Coors Field effect, right? We just discussed it with Kris Bryant. Look at Nolan Jones. At home, his OPS was 928 last year. On the road, it was 935. He was better on the road than at Coors. In both spots, it was a 900 OPS. Against lefties and against righties, his OPS against both was over 900. So whether it was a lefty, a righty, at home or on the road, his OPS was 900 last year, which is wow. Now, I think the problem we run into with Jones is if we try to, prognosticate out further growth, right? If we say, well, he went 20-20 in 100 games, he's going 28-28 this year. I'm not in there. I'm not. That's not my. That's not where I think this ends up. I also am not convinced he's going to push to hit 300. What I would say is, let's say 275, let's say 25 home runs, 15 steals. And if he plays daily, like you were talking about, going 90-90, that might be disappointing for some people to hear numbers like that because there's no big, wow, standout number after what he did in 106 games last year. But you got to understand, 275, 20, 90, 90, 15 is a hell of a season. Yeah. And that would be a great building point for him as he starts his everyday career.
It's kind of funny, Ray, to sit here and we start with Bryant, we follow with Jones, and we play the what if game. It's like, wow. And people will probably say, well, these Ray and Kyle think the Rockies are going to win 85 games. We've really crossed the positive. That's it. Those are the two guys that maybe have a turnaround or big numbers. Because, Ray, we go to question 2. And here's where the fogginess kind of comes around with this team. Talk about Nolan Jones in the outfield. Bryant's probably a first baseman. The other 2 outfield spots, because, again, history has told us you should probably care about any guy in the Rockies who's going to play every day. You should probably at least kick the tires on him. Sean Bouchard and Brenton Doyle. Ray, you just said Jeff Mans. Oh, look at Nolan Jones. Wow. Brenton Doyle and Sean Bouchard. Now, inform us, because everybody's coming across those names and probably has no earthly idea who those guys are for the Rockies.
You can't mention Rockies outfielders without mentioning Bradley Zimmer too, Kyle.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, the big ad this
I mean, I'll say it this way. Boy, do the Rockies hope that Zach Vreen is coming soon. That's really what they need. I mean, are these guys draftable in the mixed league? No. I will say that Brenton Doyle, for what it is worth, is a speed guy. And, if you're looking at, Ray, give me a guy who could steal 38 bases this year that no one's talking about. It's Brenton Doyle.
He's totally free.
Yeah, totally free. He stole 22 bases last year, right? And I don't think anyone noticed he stole 22 bases. Now he hit 200, right? So he's not, his hit tool is, I'll be kind and say his hit tool is bad. Okay.
Is he the NL version of Miles Straw? Is that what we're looking at maybe?
I mean, yeah. He's got a little more power, but similar-ish, yes. And so it's like, Doyle is someone that I don't think even in, like, I don't think he got drafted last night or 2 nights ago in labor, right? I don't think he's really going to get drafted. Yeah. But, we're on April 15th and you got an injury or 2 in the outfield and you look up and this dude's already stole 4 bases. Like, he'll be someone that is on and off rosters probably a lot this year because I think he plays a lot and he can run. Probably hits at the bottom of the order. Maybe he goes 15-30 this year. Like, as crazy as that sounds, Brenton Doyle could go 15-30 this year. Again, might hit 214, but, he's got power a little bit and he's certainly got the speed.
Expectation is both those guys, Bouchard and Doyle, probably at the bottom of the lineup for the Rockies because they're just so damn strong at the top. It's impossible to break through. Question 3, Ray. Who's going to close games here? And let me, before you even try to give an answer, and this will be maybe the toughest question of the preseason for Ray Flowers, who's going to close games here. I will say this, Ray, if they get to late March and they name a closer, I don't give 2 craps about it. The Rockies closer, whomever it may be, even if they, and I don't even know if they'll name a guy. They may just guess all season long. But, Ray, I'm not getting in on that game. Coors Field will help nobody. I don't think any of these guys can just run with the job. This is a totally toxic spot, I think, for saves this year.
Yeah, Daniel Bard is still floating around. He's got the experience of all the guys in the group. He's also almost 40 years old, and frankly, there are times when he goes out there and he can't throw strikes. Right? I think that if you're gonna go with the guy here, and I just checked the rankings, we have him 40th at RP. It's Justin
higher
Lawrence.
than I would have guessed.
Yeah, well, it's Justin Lawrence, and Justin Lawrence, Tyler Kinley, and Daniel Bard. Now, it's really tough, and this is one of the reasons why I don't like saves leagues. If Justin Lawrence gets 17 saves this year, and you draft him 40th at RP, okay, right? The problem is, what if he's the closer, he's not the closer, he's the closer, he's not the closer? What if his ERA is 4.6? Yeah. It's like, are you even going to roster him, or is he going to be the guy on the waiver wire, the one guy on the waiver wire this year? Then you look up, it's like, there's a 15 save guy on the waiver wire, but no one wants him.
Well, and Ray, if he gets a 32 saves, okay, that plays. But I would almost bet on a 4.2, 4.3 ERA and a WHIP of 1.4. So I mean, those things just hurt you as much as the saves help you, I think.
Absolutely, and his walk rate in his 3 seasons has been 11% or higher. That's terrible. He's got the ballpark factor. One positive for him is that he is not an extreme ground ball pitcher, but he's about 50% for his career. So he does keep the ball on the ground. So the home runs globally, all season long shouldn't be an issue that precludes him from being who he is. But it's we're just banking on saves here. So am I hunting Justin Lawrence? No. Am I targeting him? No. Am I going to draft him? Like, I drafted Will Smith the other night in the labor draft, and Will Smith could only be the closer half the year for the Royals and get traded. He may not even be the closer. I'd rather have Will Smith than Justin Lawrence. I mean, Justin Lawrence is not someone I'm going to have, I don't think, on any team unless I'm in an NL league.
Do you recall if he was picked?
I'll look it up.
Yeah, I wonder. I don't. I'm sure somebody took a shot on, the saves maybe late. And this leads to question 4. Is there a pitcher anywhere on this roster, Ray, that you want? I think it's 0. That you would even think of. You kind of made a case for Lawrence, if things just, last pick of the draft or whatever. Mm-hmm. But is that as good as it gets? And I'm throwing the starters in here. This just looks bad everywhere in terms of pitching for this team.
Justin Lawrence went in the 24th round of a 15-team mixed league. Brenton Doyle went in the 26th round. So they were drafted, Kyle. But by the way, where's Kris Bryant? Look him up. Kris Bryant was in the 15th round.
Oh, a little higher than I would have thought.
Bit.
Yeah.
No on the pitching. No.
Not a guy.
No. There's not a guy there in, the Rockies want their pitchers to have a 4.28 ERA and a 1.29 WHIP and just do that. That's the way the staff is built. I don't think any of these guys, maybe Austin Gomber or Dakota Hudson, maybe can bring strikeouts to the point where they're about one an inning, but I don't care. German Marquez, who's out with Tommy John surgery, was the one guy recently that you could take a shot on because he threw 190 innings every year. Yeah. And he gave 180 strikeouts every year. So there was that piece to things. But looking at this Rockies rotation, looking at the bullpen, I don't see a reason to grab any of these guys at this point.
It is Kyle Freeland, Cal Quantrill, who they added as a trade addition.
Oh, boy. Ugh.
Austin Gomber, Ryan Feltner, and Dakota Hudson. That's probably your starting 5 right now.
Hideous.
And again, they didn't make any additions. I mean, Hudson was added. Bradley Zimmer was added. Quantrill. I mean, that's where the Rockies are right now, which, again, it makes sense. They shouldn't be spending money on anybody at this point. It leads to the prospects, right? And you mentioned one, Zach Vreen, who I think in terms of like potential and impact, he's maybe leveled off a bit. The people who are into the scouting game and the rookie game and the prospects game, he's maybe slid a bit. We're going to see him this year. It sounds like Sterling Thompson is probably their top hitter. He was a guy just drafted, I think, in the 2nd round last year out of college. They got a pitcher out of college, Chase Dollander, who was like a superstar either in his sophomore or junior year at Tennessee, then kind of fell off a cliff. He still got drafted in the 1st round, but people were like, oh, what the hell happened here? All 3 of those guys, Ray, would probably see at some point. I don't know if any of the 3 are worth stashing or sitting on. It's, play it by ear as we get into the season.
Yeah, Zach Vreen is intriguing because his hit tool, he's very similar to Brenton Doyle in the fact that he's going to run and he's likely going to steal a lot of bases. His hit tool is better than Doyle, but to your point, the prospect gurus have soured a little bit on his game. You're totally right to say that. They're not as excited about the bat as they used to be. but Vreen can run, and he'll show up and that's what he'll do. So if and when he gets his groove going on the minors, and he's never played what I'm looking at, he's played 80 games at AA. Once he gets going, he gets called up. Like Bouchard, Doyle, Zimmer, these guys can't stop. There's no reason to stop.
Bryant's going to be hurt, things like that. Yeah.
So there's no reason for Vreen to be blocked if he's performing at the minor league level. So we'll see him at some point, but it's not necessarily a one category play, but I'm kind of looking at it like that.
Take a chance on whom, Ray Flowers?
We talked about him, and I hate it because we talked about him, but I'm going Kris Bryant. I'm a mark. I'm just going Kris Bryant. I wanted to say Charlie Blackmon, who's better than people give him credit for, but I'm going to go Kris Bryant.
I'm going to mention a guy that we talked about too. It's Nolan Jones, because that's a name. Like, seriously, people, this is a top 15 outfielder right now that you have to draft. And I think that's going to be a name people will hesitate. It's like, I can get Mike Trout after Nolan Jones. Like, there's that mental block, right? I'm going to draft Nolan Jones ahead of Mike Trout. I'd take a chance on it. I think this can be a hugely productive bat. I think Ray's point on him is important, though. Don't extrapolate that I get 155 games and this guy's going 30-30. Yeah. Maybe last year was a little bit per game too high. Maybe this year comes back to a more normal rate. The numbers are still there. It's still going to be good, but it's not going to be explosive. Maybe Coors changes that, but I'd take a chance on him. My man to, how do I phrase this? Pass on. I'm going to go Ezequiel Tovar, Ray, who's very young. Mm-hmm. He was 21, and honestly, he was fine as a 21-year-old last year. But I'm going to pass on him, Ray, because where he is landing in drafts, there are so many other guys I'd rather have at shortstop. Like, honestly, I'd rather take a shot on Carlos Correa figuring something out than Ezequiel Tovar. I don't know, and I hate saying this about a guy who's 22 and plays at Coors Field, but I don't know if there's really, a lot more to offer there. If like there's a number that takes off. I just think there are better options in his draft area at his position. So I'm going to pass on Tovar.
By the way, are you excited or proud of me for not saying I want to take this chance on the guy behind me? I didn't even say Brandon Rogers.
Without saying, Ray. It goes without saying.
I think you're right about Tovar. Tovar had a really strong season for his age and his development, right? Is there another step this year? I don't see it at this point in time. Doesn't walk much. Strikeout rate was higher than we would like to see. The batted ball data is very moderate. I think he's totally fine, but it's hard for me to see growth, so I understand what you're saying.
Who's your guy to pass on?
Yeah, and he's productive. He qualifies at 2 spots, but I'm going to say Ryan McMahon. And, there's safety in McMahon because his floor is his floor. The problem is his floor is here and his ceiling is here. This is what he is. So there's consistency there. There's dual position eligibility. But as I have said for years now, the breakout that people anticipated happening just never happened.
I always find him in a few of my teams, Ray. And you keep thinking like, oh, I got him at Coors Field for 6 games. And he sits one. He has one good game out of the whole week. And you're like, and he's a fine player. It's just we've always wanted more.
He had 198 strikeouts last year, Kyle. 198.
Yuck. Tomorrow, a team that used to be right there where the Rockies are now, Detroit. Things are turning in the Motor City. We will take a look at the Tigers coming up on tomorrow's show. Let us now go to the Fantasy Guru Draft Guide. Each and every day, we like to promote, to discuss, to profile an article that Ray has up. Ray, today it is strand rate. Left on base percentage. So we're talking about on the pitcher side. I don't know. Do you ever care about the left on base percentage by a hitter? I don't know if I ever do, but pitchers, I guess we should care about, right?
Yeah, and I think that this is one of those numbers. It's kind of the pitching component of batting average or balls in play for hitters. And I say that because there are pitchers that are continually just below the league average, just above the league average, but really it's a pretty narrow band. Like if you leap one year, you kind of pull back the next year. If you suck one year, you kind of get better the next year. There's a very defined band where pitchers generally end up. And if you look at 2, 3, 4 years, most of the time you kind of end up in that zone.
I'm glad you put the league average here, and I don't know if that's stayed consistent over the years, if it's always in that range. But
it is.
In effect, Ray, that because this is a question that sometimes pops up. I've got a young baseball fan, hopefully developing in the family, and there will probably be a moment where he says, if you get on base, how often do you score? And I guess, Ray, roughly speaking, 27.5% of the time. If you get on base, you can plan to score. The bolded spot here, I think, is important because that's really how you use this number, Ray, because it can give insight into a guy who had a lower ERA than we had a right to expect, or a higher ERA. Now, other things go into ERA, of course, BABIP and home run percentage and home runs per nine, all that stuff. But I think the left on base percentage, Ray, there are some years where it's out of whack and a player looks maybe worse or better than they actually were.
Yeah, since 2015, the lowest this number has been is 71.8%, and the highest it's been is 72.9%, which again is an extremely narrow grouping. I think, yeah, that and talking about the bolded parts here, look at this. When I say it deviates by more than 5 percentage points, then we're considering something significant likely to go in the other direction. It's 5 points. So we're talking, 67%, 78%, something like that, which again is a pretty narrow grouping. So it's not a universal, if it's high, it's going to go low, and if it's low, it's going to go high thing. Some guys are at 77% every year, right? Because they're better out of the stretch, because they have better defense behind them, because they don't allow home runs. That so they're it's not just like batting average balls of play. It's a very good starting point, because to your point, Kyle, if you look at a guy and his ERA was 4.8 this year, and all these numbers are like, this is better than league average, that's better than league average, that's an impressive number, and then you go look at his left on base rate and it's 68%. It's like we kind of know that number's going up, and that's going to drop that ERA down potentially half a run just with the leveling out of that.
And the other part, Ray, is, and I think this is something. Again, a lot of this stuff can kind of be the determining hair to split if you're looking at two guys, this number is important to me. But along with this number is the idea of the bullpen and what's behind them. And what do we look at? I mean, I know going into this year, a team like the Minnesota is, I don't think people talk about them as like a great staff or bullpen. They're just kind of there, maybe an AL Central winner, but not a threat for the World Series. But Ray, that's a team where, they have starting pitchers you should kind of be interested in, a few of them, and they have a really good bullpen. And so maybe a guy like Joe Ryan, or maybe we saw this with Pablo Lopez last season. I don't have this, but I wonder how many times Lopez left the game with runners on base and how often those guys came around, because Minnesota has a good bullpen. They had a good one last year. They got a good one, it appears, this year. And that is just one example of maybe you say, I'm going to go with this Twins pitcher over this guy from, Arizona or wherever it may be.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up as we talk here. And to your point, you look at the pitchers last year that were in the rotation. Sonny Gray was 77%. Pablo Lopez was 76%. Joe Ryan was 75%. Kenta Maeda was 74%. And Bailey Ober was 79%.
Every single one of them over the league average.
Yeah, and a couple of them substantially, right? Because when you start approaching 80, that's not repeatable level stuff. And they had three guys over 76%. So that, and this is also why the number isn't like batting average balls in play, not directly telling you the full story, because the pitcher could do everything right, bullpen could blow it, right? Like that's so it's a team game. We don't always look at it that way because we're so focused on the individual players, but a lot of these numbers, pitching side of things, the ERA, offensive side, the runs scored, a lot of it is certainly based on team context.
I am looking at Fangraphs, who they always have fun stuff here. Best, they have a ranking of the best bullpens, what they foresee. Phillies number 1, which is crazy because 2-3 years ago, they had no idea what they were doing in the bullpen. Braves, Twins are 3, Brewers and Pirates. How about that one, Ray? I mean, no one's interested really in pitching staffs, pitching options, assets from the Brewers and the Pirates. But again, if that's legitimate, and who knows, 1,000 things are going to happen. But at least on the surface going into the year, the Brewers and the Pirates maybe could help you with some starting pitchers having a lower ERA than you might expect.
Yeah, and teams need, this game we talk about all the time. What is it? Like, it's not even 60%, I think, last year of the innings were thrown by starting pitchers. So bullpens are extremely important, not just for the left on base percentage, but just for the overall health of a team. And it doesn't have to, we focus again on the 9th inning, right? We want who's getting the saves. But having a strong bullpen, whether you've got 4 guys with 7 saves or you have 1 guy with 35, having that bullpen, it's a huge differentiator in the fantasy space for your overall team performance, and certainly in the real world for these teams.
I love how they can give projections on left on base percentage. I don't know how that figures, but the Brewers are projected out of their bullpen to have a 73.6 LOB. So do with that what you will. But that is, I'd love to see that number get figured out, Ray.
Yeah.
I don't even know who you're facing.
No, the situation, when you're coming in, when the pitcher that's starting is going out of the game. Hey, let's give it a shot, though, Kyle.
Left on base percentage, strand rate. You can find more of that as well as dozens upon dozens of articles in the 2024 Fantasy Guru Draft Guide. You see it down there, FSD20, to get 20% off. Ray, we'll wrap it up with some quick news and notes. You mentioned our buddy Phil Backert down at Baltimore Orioles camp. He will not see Gunnar Henderson doing much of anything. We're now hearing he'll miss at least a week of spring games, and he's got no bleak issue. I've got no problem with the decision, Ray. Again, there's no reason. It just isn't. It's one of those things, and we've said this with other injuries. It's like, I don't really care with this one, Ray, unless we get to like March 15th and it's still not happening. Right. He's doing only backfield work. I would like to see him in an actual game in spring camp. So I think, that's still 2.5, 3 weeks away. So to me, this Henderson thing, not a shocker. It's a little different with Tommy Edman. And I know he's not drafted as a superstar, but Ray, he had a wrist surgery at the end of last year. And according to reports, he's not even cleared for full activities right now. And he's a pretty important piece to the Cardinals puzzle. I don't know about fantasy puzzles, but that's a guy who could be limited at the start of the season.
Yeah, multi-position flexibility is obviously his calling card, and it's what really intrigues us in the fantasy space. Certainly the ability to steal 30 bases as well. But he is someone that has to play every day. He does not do anything outstanding. He's got to get the plate appearances. If his plate appearance total is 470 versus 570, it drastically changes the production he gets. So that is definitely a guy to keep close tabs on, because he's very useful because of that flexibility and the speed, but he's got to be in that lineup.
Kodai Senga of the Mets is dealing with arm fatigue. February? I don't know. We'll see. Miami. We talked about Tim Anderson yesterday when we kind of run through shortstops and guys who struggled last year, and said, are you surprised, Ray, that he doesn't have it? And I guess it comes down to money, Ray, and I get it. He's a vet who hasn't had that one big significant payday, and everybody thinks they're better maybe than the market does. But we got a report yesterday. The Miami Marlins would love to have Tim Anderson. They'd make him their starting shortstop if he'll play for $2 million. I get that, Ray. If you're Tim Anderson, you're looking at that and saying, hell no. I mean, even if I can be a starting short, what? We got an agreement? What?
We got an update since the show began. He is now the Marlins shortstop.
Aha! How much do we have money?
1 year, $5 million. So more than was reported.
Okay. That, Ray, is 2.5 times more. And again, he was probably going into this, Ray, and saying, okay, I had a rough year, but I can get 2 years, 12, 15 million.
Right.
Markets told him you're 1 in 5. And this is that we always hear about the giant contracts, but the middle ground is just wiped out. And Tim Anderson fell into that middle ground, and he settles now. Okay, he's with the Marlins. He's a starter, Ray. Mm-hmm. If you're in a 29 round, 12 teamer, you find a spot for Tim Anderson late.
I mean, this guy, what a terrible time to do what he did last year. I mean, he had 318. I think he was second in baseball in batting average over the previous 4 years before hitting 245 last year. So he hits the open market. There's no desire for this excitement for his services, as you mentioned. I don't know. I mean, I think that it's a great signing for the Marlins, and it's good in the fantasy sense because this is not him going to be a utility guy. He's going to play every day. He's 30 years old. He'll be 31 later this season. I think there's going to be a rebound from last season. Is it back to him hitting 15 home runs and batting 300? I can't go that far. So I think that Tim Anderson will take a veteran flyer on a guy that could weasel his way toward the top of the order when it's all said and done. Maybe he goes 10-15 this year, hits 275. Is he draftable in deep leagues? Yes. But again, I'm not expecting him to go back to like his 2021 levels or anything like that.
This team, Ray, is pretty interesting with Miami. We've talked about him before and where's the offense. And, you add Tim Anderson. I'm not saying he's a linchpin, but now this offense looks a lot better, at least name recognition. They've got still a good pitching staff. The problem is the NL East. But, Ray, if you threw this Marlins team in the AL Central, NL Central, maybe even the AL West, I think you got a second place team in all those divisions. You could maybe even put them in the NL West and get a second place team. We joke about the Marlins, how cheap they are, crappy ballpark, all that, and they don't really have an offense, but it's a decent team. They're just stuck in the absolute wrong division right now.
Yeah, I mean, Sandy Alcantara is out for this season with Tommy John surgery, but he's obviously a huge piece of the rotation. The rotation: Luzardo, Yuri Perez, Braxton Garrett, Edward Cabrera, Trevor Rogers. On paper, that could be a really good rotation. They've got big arms in the bullpen for sure. And you look at their bench, and it's a bench, and John Birdie can play a little bit everywhere. Vidal Brujan can play infield and outfield and's got a lot of speed. And Nick Gordon can play infield and outfield. It's a good major league player. Like, that's a really, like you said, this is a good roster build for a team that doesn't have all the money to spend, but it is a tough division to be in.
Well, they're kind of building like the team to the northwest of them in Tampa. I mean, they kind of have a similar makeup where now Tampa's got the high end, hitters, guys that we expect, Caminero, Rosarina, these guys who can be difference makers at the dish. Miami does not have that. That's kind of the difference on that front. Eric Hosmer has retired, ending a 13-year career. I guess we call it a success. Obviously, will be remembered as a Royal. More than anything else. Never really happened with the Red Sox and the Cubs and the Padres. He bounced around late, but a good career for him. And then, Ray, our final thing on the NFL side, Justin Fields jumped on a podcast with his teammate, Equanimous St. Brown, and then I think Equanimous brother, Amon-Ra St. Brown. They have a podcast. Sure, it's not as good as Ray and I, but they have one.
Right.
But they do get Justin Fields on their podcast. And they had him on yesterday, Ray, and he was pretty open that he's kind of tired of all the crap and the trades, and he's unfollowed. There was a big thing about him unfollowing the Bears, and he's unfollowed everything in the NFL. He was just tired of seeing that on his timeline, Justin Fields rumors, because that really has been probably one of the top 2 or 3 storylines in the NFL for the past 3-4 weeks is what are the Bears going to do with Justin Fields? And as you might expect, he's kind of just tired. I mean, he's heard for the last 3 years, you're our future. And now, Ray, he feels like that was a total lie almost.
Well, the part that strikes me is not the frustration, because if I was an athlete, at point blank, I wouldn't pay 6 seconds of attention to social media. No way in hell. But why hasn't the team sat down with him and told him? Yeah. Isn't that just, whether it's sorry, kid, or we love you, kid? Like, why can't the team sit down? If they're really not telling him, you have to think they're undecided, and if someone bowls them over, they're going to trade him, right? Am I wrong by analyzing it that way?
One of the difficulties is, where does he go? Because there aren't, I don't know, like I saw Vegas mentioned, but it's like, why would they just hired the OC in Vegas that was the OC in Chicago? They couldn't really make it. Like, that makes no sense. I've seen New England mentioned.
New England's been mentioned a lot.
I could see that. Atlanta's been mentioned. Pittsburgh is now popping up. Those are possibilities, Ray, but are the Bears going to, like, I get it. They got Caleb Williams if they want, but are the Bears going to give away Justin Fields for like a 5th round pick?
No.
That's what because of his contract and how you have to commit to him. It sounds crazy. And again, I've gone on record time and time again, and I'm not changing my stripes. They should stick with Fields. They should. And if the number 1 pick, nobody wants to pay your price, you draft Marvin Harrison Jr. You call it a day. You're fine.
Yep.
If someone wants to pay your price, you're walking away with maybe even, again, Marvin Harrison Jr. You can flip-flop with the Patriots, flip-flop with the Commanders.
Right.
And you're still walking away with a great receiver and extra picks. So I still think that's the route, Ray, to go, where you hold on to Fields, and worst case scenario, you take Marvin Harrison Jr. as your number 1 overall pick.
Another team mentions the Steelers. I think that would be intriguing if he were to end up there. But yeah, I mean, if you think about it, Kmet, Moore, Harrison, a backfield that works, like that all of a sudden looks like a potentially pretty dynamic offense. I don't see the issue with that. I agree with you. Justin Fields, if the Bears don't want him, and it seems like they're going to, then trade him to my team. You know what I mean? Like, if I was a fan, I'd be like, get this guy. He again, over and over again, he's a top half in this league quarterback.
What people will see who just kind of read articles or follow the Chicago Tribune or so. Right. Every time they talk about how bad he is as a passer, which I don't know why anyone's surprised his numbers over the last 2 years or 3 years are where they're at. They really haven't built much of an offense at all there.
Correct.
And he's not, his skill set is running. That's where he's dynamic. So maybe the Bears thought they were getting something else or thought he was going to make, and I guess if that's the case, move on. But any team that gets him, Ray, just understand he's a runner. Like, I hope no team is saying, let's add Justin Fields and we're going to turn him into a passer. You know, this is the game you played when you signed him, when you drafted him, I should say. So it's really weird that Chicago is like out on this guy because Caleb Williams is going to be, you know, there are better odds, Ray, that Caleb Williams is a worse player than Justin Fields.
I think that's fair.
And people don't believe that at all. But look at quarterbacks drafted early. Justin Fields hasn't been too damn bad. He just has not. We shall see. More to come. What's the draft? 2 months?
Yeah, coming up about.
Yeah, well, we got coverage over at Fantasy Guru. Hey, tonight, NBA is back. And Ray, you're back on Sirius XM. You and Justin get to follow. It's a busy night of NBA that you guys will get to follow along this evening, right?
Yeah, Elite Sports Game Time, 8 to 10 Monday through Thursday on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio. So 8 o'clock Eastern tonight, Justin and I will be out there. It's been a slow couple first days of the show. It's been more of a traditional radio show because there's only been a couple of hockey games going each night. But yeah, the basketball gets going. And if you thought Justin had energy the first two shows, I'm sure he's going to have even more energy with all the basketball games tonight.
Yes, he will. If nothing else, he is a jolt of energy, that Finsterman. So that'll be fun. 8 o'clock Eastern tonight. Ray and I are back tomorrow, 11 a.m. Thanks to everybody tuning in. Let's see, tomorrow we'll wrap up shortstops. We'll talk some prospects for this year. We'll head to Detroit, talk the Tigers. Ray will have another column to spotlight. Probably some more news and notes. And again, we'll have our first spring training final. Padres and Dodgers play at 3:10 later today. Ray, have a great afternoon, and we'll talk on Friday.
You do the same, Kyle.
He is Ray Flowers. I am Kyle Elfrink. This has been Fantasy Sports Daily, powered by fantasyguru.com.